When we learned about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline effort, it was years after it was already in the process. You know how all these things are done secretively. They had already met with the county commissioners in Robeson County, a very fancy dinner, and had received the endorsement of the commissioners for this scheme. So we were already 2 years behind before we ever even learned about it. So how did we get to where we got on July 5th, 2020? Because it was not easy to get this project on the national radar. I mean, we're the Southeast, right? Who pays attention to the Southeast? That must not be a big issue, right? Well, it was. One of the things that we learned in Robeson County was that in terms of working together around stopping this scheme of Duke and Dominion, the indigenous people was not at the table, was not included in the conversation. It was clear that work needed to be done to get that voice, especially since population-wise, it was the largest impacted community in the state. With just over 100,000 recognized members, we had over 30,000 individuals identified who would be directly impacted in North Carolina alone. You're talking about 1/3 of the population. And yet our state and Duke and Dominion declared that there was no disproportionate impact. So what happened? We began to get the word out, and we began to work with our partners to understand that while it is important to work with citizens of indigenous nations, that we also need to work with tribal governments, which is that's a whole nother workshop, by the way. What happened was that as the understanding began to grow in the indigenous communities, it also grew across the state because we were all, again, working together. We were interdependent as we were working out our issues. And then we had Union Hill. Union Hill is the historic African-American community that was founded post-Civil War, and that was the projected home for one of the compressor stations. And all of our work trying to get the conversation about the ACP scheme on the national conversation came to a point. And through the combination of organizing legal help, interventions through policy work, that was stopped. And it made a loud boom across the nation in terms of the environmental justice issues that was related to this scheme to site the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. What we began as a resistance to an opposition to an awful scheme that made no sense became a reform movement that insisted that impacted people's voices be at the table, that all impacted people's voices be heard, and that grew in North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. And we continued to communicate with each other. And in that reformation, that reforming, we were talking about revisioning, reimagining how decisions are made. All of that led us to work towards recreating our communities, recreating ourselves with each other, recreating how we see ourselves in relationship to power, because we are all born with power. And how we connect to that power, the power within us that can connect to the power that it is in everything else. We knew that we could recreate the story. And so while everyone was saying, you're looking for the impossible? No, we knew it was possible. We won. We won. If it had not been for all the voices, we would have the Atlantic Coast Pipeline right now.